My goal in making this video is not to just give you a bunch of steps that you just blindly follow. Instead, I want you to understand why it is we do certain things at a certain time. This chapter is an example of that. I like to use analogies, and one analogy I often use when I'm teaching somebody how to build a wheel is to consider the wheel as a teenager. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's say the analogy is this. Let's say that you have a child and you're trying to instill in your child some concepts of, let's say, being a good worker, showing up to work on time and honoring your employer, doing a good job and things like that. If your child is 5 or 6 years old, the child is too young. On the other hand, if you wait until the child is in his mid-20s, maybe it's too late to instill that good work ethic. So perhaps the teenage years are the time to try to influence the child in a positive way. The analogy for wheels is this. When you're tensioning the wheel, if the spoke tension is too low, let's say you're just starting out and you start getting a little bit of tension and you see that the wheel is out of true or that the spoke tension is not even and is not balanced out, that is too early to make the changes. The wheel is not ready yet to be influenced in that way. On the other hand, if you wait until the wheel is an adult, it's reached full tension, perhaps the wheel isn't going to be easily adjusted at that point. The best time to do those things, to adjust the wheel, to balance out the tension, to get the hops out, to get it laterally true and so on, is when the wheel is a teenager, which is about 3/4 of the way toward the tension on the drive side. If you do that, you'll find that many of the problems that you might have been tempted to react to prematurely will have gone away as the wheel tries to distribute the stress within itself. Try that, and I think you will avoid a lot of problems that lead to unintended consequences. Sometimes by reacting too soon, you create a problem that otherwise would have gone away if you'd left the wheel alone.
Let me try to explain that a little bit better with a timeline to illustrate the order and timing of some of the things that we're doing. Here is our timeline and 3 points on the timeline, not drawn to scale. On the left, we have 0% tension, which would be 0 kilograms of force or 0 newtons if we want to use the scientific system for force. On the right-hand side is 100% of our tension, which might be 120 kilograms of force or 1176 newtons. That's about a 10-to-1 ratio of kilograms of force to newtons. Here at 75%, 90 kilograms of force or 882 newtons. Now on the left is our starting point. That's where we laced up the wheel and got all the nipples to a consistent starting point with a fingernail trick. And at 75%, we're going to true the wheel, balance the drive side tension, and get the dish close. Over here on the right is when we're going to true the wheel, again, balance the non-drive side tension, get the wheel dished perfectly, and whatever other tweaking we have to do to make the wheel perfect. In this area here, between 0 and 75%, we did a number of things. We're going to add consistent turns of nipples. We did that. Lubricate the nipples. We did that. Preset the spoke bands. We did that. Relieve stress in the spokes by squeezing them. We did that. But when it comes to truing the wheel and balancing spoke tension, we did not do that, and I want to give you an insight as to why. This is the graphic you'll see in the next couple of slides. The rim is red, the spokes are blue, and the nipples are green. Here's a wheel that I've got maybe 1/3 tension, and I started with a perfectly round wheel and laced it up carefully, consistently tightened the nipples, so I should enjoy some pretty good consistency in the intermediate tension that I can measure and feel on these spokes. Here is the same scenario, except in this case here I have a rim that is not totally round. In the major axis, I have a dimension of 630.25 millimeters. In the minor axis, 629.75. So I have a difference in those two dimensions of about a half a millimeter. Even if I have very carefully turned my nipples onto the spokes, I will find that these spokes here are going to be tighter and have more tension on them than these, which will feel looser. The job of the wheel builder is to make the wheel round even if the rim doesn't start out that way. If you just screw these nipples in here to make the tension on those spokes like the tension on the other ones, you will lock in that out of round condition. But if I ignore that temptation to try to prematurely balance out the difference in the tension and I keep tensioning my nipples consistently, then the additional tension and stress on these spokes will be redistributed within the wheel and the sides will pull in and the top and bottom push out toward roundness. So again, if I start out with a perfectly round rim and I consistently tension my spokes by equal turns of the nipples, the rim is going to stay round. But if we start out with a rim that's out of round and we ignore the differences in the spoke tension in the early going, the wheel will move all by itself toward roundness.
We're definitely going to help this wheel achieve perfection, but we want to give the wheel an opportunity to correct some things by itself first. So that is why we're not going to worry about the roundness or the consistency of the spoke tension until we get to about the 3/4 point.
To that end, here are a few recommended tips. Make sure that the spokes on any given side of the wheel are exactly the same length. After lacing up the wheel, get all nipples to the same starting point until you get to the 3/4 tension point, which could be 90 kilograms of force if you're aiming for 120. Put equal numbers of turns on the nipples on any given side of the wheel. That means you're going to ignore differences in spoke tension until you get to the point where you have 3/4 of your final tension. Before you reach 3/4 tension, don't give in to the temptation to tighten spokes that appear looser than others. And balance out spoke tension on any given side of the wheel only after you have reached the 3/4 tension point.